As you know, on Sunday night or Monday morning of every week, we post a new expository semiotics explaining why we would choose which lectionary readings. But in these readings, our dream is, and our desire is, to help you read the signs and fondle the details and spot the seminal metaphors, the condensed signs and the stories that are key for preaching to a digital culture. So strap on your seatbelt and join us as we prospect our passages for today. Leonard Sweet here in the great Pacific Northwest with the Canadian coastals behind us, and remembrances of another mountain area, the Allegheny Appalachian Mountains, in my cup by Sweet's Body and Soul Cafe and Mountain Store in West Virginia, which I opened up a long time ago. So the mature mountains of West Virginia and the adolescent strapping look-at-me mountains of the Canadian Rockies. It's good to be here with you. This is vlog number 34. This is the 23rd Sunday after Pentecost, and we have some great text today. And it begins in Joshua 24 with the covenant at Shechem. Shechem, you remember, was the first capital of the kingdom of Israel in the tribe of Ephraim. This was the tribe that, according to legend, was the first one to have enough faith to follow Moses as he went through the sea into the dry ground of the Red Sea. So it's a very important tribe, and Shechem is this covenant where we have this memorable quote that, if you know nothing about the story of Shechem, you know this quote: "Choose you this day whom you will serve. And as for me and my house, what? We will serve Yahweh. We will serve the Lord." A great quote that, in many ways, every day, it's a re-covenanting, a reconverting to this choose you this day. It's an early morning prayer almost, whom you will serve. Then as for me and my house, because things occur in community in the Bible. It's not just about an individual, it's about a community. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Psalm 78, 1-7. I'm not going to read that. You can do it yourself, and there's some wonderful things there. But it's a typical praise psalm. And then, of course, the great passage from 1 Thessalonians 4, where the dead in Christ will rise first, and the story of, in the week after All Saints, about those who have died, and what happens to them. But the text that I want to spend time with, and I suggest that you really kind of ruminate. Ruminate means chew, and reflect on. There's this great passage in Matthew 25, the parable of the 10 bridesmaids. This is so Jesus, because when he wants to get something across, he does not go like we've been used to. Okay, these are my 5 points today, or these are my three things I want you to remember. He tells a story. Okay, and does the kingdom of heaven is like, and then comes a metaphor and a narrative. So here is this incredible metaphor and narrative about the 10 bridesmaids. You remember the story. The 5 were deemed as what were called foolish, and 5 were wise. Here's the story. Let me just read it, and so you can bathe and marinate your mind and savor the story in your spirit. Then the kingdom of heaven shall be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were wise and 5 were foolish. Those who were foolish took their lamps, but took no oil with them. But the wise took jars of oil with their lamps, and while the bridegroom delayed, they all rested and slept. But at midnight there was a cry, "Look, the bridegroom is coming, come out to meet him." And then all those virgins rose and trimmed their lamps. But the foolish said to the wise, give us some of your oil, for our lamps have gone out. The wise answered, no, lest there not be enough for us and you. Go rather to those who sell it and buy some for yourselves. But while they went to buy some, the bridegroom came. And those who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet. And here are some of the harshest words in all the Bible. And the door was shut. Afterward, the other virgins came and also said, Lord, Lord, open the door for us. But he answered, truly I say to you, I do not know you. By the way, the King James Version has a little Appalachian in it. It goes like this, truly, truly, I say to you. Or the King James, I declare, I do not know you. I declare. See, so Jesus has some Appalachian in him too, maybe. Huh? Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour in which the Son of Man is coming. Now, this is such an important text for our time, a moment for our time. And we have a raven who wants to get in on this sermon reflection as well. But there's so much you can do here. One is feature on the oil. And we have not spent enough time with oil. I deal with this in one of my books called The Bad Habits of Jesus, the different kinds of, well, there's a Stellar's J. Look at that. I deal with it a little bit in my book, Bad Habits of Jesus, where I distinguish between the two kinds of oil. But oil, Messiah really means anointing with oil. I mean, it means the anointed one, and you anoint with oil. So Messiah, and you cannot separate Messiah, Jesus, and oil, because that's what the Messiah means, oil anointed. That's the Messiah, oil anointed. Anointed. The question becomes, though, what kind of oil is the anointing done with? And that's a whole other conversation. I want to focus on the fact that we are now living in a world where, how can I put it? In the old world, not just pre-COVID, but pre-Google, if you invited somebody to come to church with you, and you said, come to my church, we just can't wait to have you there and join us. We're a place where anything can happen and probably will. If you said that to somebody pre-Google, you would probably get the heebie-jeebies. No. You got to be kidding me. Anything can happen, it probably will. Why would I come to a church like that? In a TGIF world, in a Google world, not a Gutenberg world, come join our pastor. Anything can happen, it probably will. You got to come. And our church family, anything can happen, it probably will. You got to come. It's like catnip. We have no idea. The world has changed. And it's partly changed because we live in a world where the only thing you can expect is the unexpected. I want to repeat. The only thing you can expect is the unexpected. The expected doesn't happen. It's the unexpected that you can expect. So how do you do ministry in that kind of a world? And we got two strategies here. And Jesus talks about wise and foolish. But there were 5 who said, and they're all part of the bridal party, we know the bridegroom. We know when he's going to come, so we're going to only take enough oil as we need for his arrival, because we know when he's going to come, and we're going to trim our wicks accordingly. And so they trimmed their wicks, in other words, planned for where they predicted, because they were planners, strategic planners. We are going to plan it out, and we're going to, if you will, stick to the plan. He's going to come right at a certain time. We know it, and we're going to be ready for it when he comes. You had 5, however, that weren't the planners. They were the preparers. And they said, no, we have no idea when he's going to come. You can't ever tell when the bridegroom's come. You can't plan for the bridegroom to come and stick to the plan, because, no, he could come at any moment. And so they were the preparers. You had planners and preparers. In the trimming of the wicks, I mean, you had strategic planners. They were going to stick to the plan. No. And who went into the party? It was the preparers. They were living in a state of preparedness. I want you to hear this. This is the key thing for our world today. A state of preparedness. Because we live in a world where literally anything can happen, and probably will. And you cannot do anything but expect the unexpected. And so it's a very different way of moving into the future. Things were pretty stable in the Gutenberg world. The status quo was kind of constant, and you could count on changes that were just very, very incremental. But now change is exponential. I mean, change is happening so quick. And we live in a world, let's call it, where what is the only things you can count on is you will meet, they go by various names. Let me just give you some. Black swans, wild cards, house of cards, dropping dinosaurs, game-changing arrivals and events. They're all, I mean, this is the norm now. And how do you do ministry in that world? You can't plan for that world. You got to prepare for that world. And so we've got to be in a constant state, as Jesus is recommending here, of preparedness. Preparedness. And I don't mean about, this is about, this is the sublime to the ridiculous here, but let me start with the ridiculous. All right. Not too long ago, I was in Birmingham, Alabama, to do something for the Methodists in that state, and to film some videos for distribution and for development. And of course, when I'm in Birmingham, every day I'm in Birmingham, I have to go to my favorite restaurant. And my favorite restaurant is Nicky's West. It's a smorgasbord. And I have to prepare myself every time I go to Nicky's West for the ravishment and violation of 24 vegetables that come at me like an assault. As I go up there, the farmer's market right across the street, and I got the biggest lima beans. I got 4 different kinds of okra. I got not just collard greens, but I got mustard greens, and I got spinach, and I have to literally go into a state of preparedness just to go eat at my favorite restaurant, because I can't handle it. It's just such an assault on the senses and on goodness and beauty. And so even the ridiculous about even going to your favorite restaurant, you got to be in a state of preparedness. The London Times, every day, they have at least 5,000 obituaries prepared, because you never know who's going to die. And so they are in a constant state of preparedness, so that when somebody does, like Sean Connery just died yesterday, but they are prepared to celebrate his life, memorialize his life. And they live in that constant state of obituary editors. I mean, these are people who do with that, but they got to live in a state of preparedness. I love Keith Green. Anybody remember Keith Green, the Christian singer who died in 1983? But his last concert was in New York City. And somebody asked him what he believed about the second coming. And his famous response was, it just came like this: I pray for pre, but I prepare for post. I pray for pre, but I prepare for post. The key to doing ministry in this culture is a state of preparedness. I dedicated my textbook on preaching, called Giving Blood, to Ken Elmer, who I think is the greatest living preacher in the world today. And part of the dedication of that book to my friend and colleague Ken Ulmer was his constant reminder to preachers that you don't prepare a sermon, you prepare the preacher. You don't prepare a sermon. It's more important to prepare the preacher than to prepare the sermon. There's a dish called fugu, and it's a puffer fish, and it's supposed to be one of the delicacies of nature. The problem is that every sermon is a plate of fugu. And fugu is this puffer fish that if it's not properly prepared, it contains a lethal poison and you can die. That's how important preparation is for preachers. The Midnight Movies is a documentary. It's a documentary film from the margin to the mainstream. It's written by Stuart Samuels. And he based it on his earlier book called Midnight Movies. And it relates to the fact that when they started putting out horror movies, and this is Halloween weekends, I've been thinking about this, but they had midnight showings because they did not want to show it in the daytime because you got to get kids there and all that kind of stuff. So horror movies premiered, some of you may remember this, premiered at midnight. That was they had midnight premieres. And he talked about the uniqueness of the releasing these movies at midnight. And the creator of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, Jim Sharman, in this documentary, talks about how it was like for him to see what these fan clubs would do to these midnight showings of his movie. And they would have makeup, they would have costumes, they'd have props, they'd have chants, they'd have cheers, they'd have a whole party. They'd have certain lighting, sound effects. And he said, for example, with the Rocky Horror Picture Show, that it was, these are his words, like watching Frankenstein come alive, taking on a life of his own. Like watching Frankenstein come alive, taking on a life of his own. And this is what preaching the word does. Preaching the story. The best definition of preaching, arguably, is 20 minutes in which to raise the dead. I don't think it may take less than that, but preaching, teaching, and healing take on a life of their own. The question is that life of its own Frankenstein or Jesus? Is it a reviving, resuscitating, or is it a resurrecting? And it all depends on what spirit does the reviving, depending on whether it is in spirit and in truth, or it's all spirit and gets detached from the truth. And that's why preparation is so important, because we prepare for the Spirit's awakening. We prepare for the Spirit's enlivening and rapturing, so that it's not Frankenstein that is revived, but it is Jesus. The sudden appearance. People talk about we get a new normality. Let's just get past COVID. No, the new normality, sisters and brothers, is black swans, wild cards, 900-pound gorillas. It is runaway trains. It's Carrington events. This is the new world in which the new normality. So I want to suggest, and you can play with some of these and develop them as you want. I'm calling it 5+1 ways to prepare for the unexpected and to face the future, based on the story of the 5 strategic planners and 5 preparers. Now, let me say that I am a list person, and I still make lists. Every day I make lists. I try and get people to make lists. And I know what I want to do based on that list. But I have never, in my entire life of making lists, gotten one day to go according to plan. Have you? I mean, I don't care how beautiful the list is and how much it makes sense. You are interrupted every day with wild cards, black swans, drooping dinosaurs, Carrington events, a house of cards. I mean, you can't get one day to go. Are we thinking we can get our churches to go to a strategic plan for 3 years and 5? Are you kidding me? No. But I still make lists. See? So I'm not arguing against some planning here. But you're making a list because you are fully expecting at any moment that list can be trumped by something that God sends you, someone that God sends you, something that happens during that day. And so that list is there to give you a trajectory, but it is not to be worshipped and idolized, and I got to stick to the plan. And so you combine the planning and the preparedness. So here's 5 ways to prepare for the unexpected plus 1, and the plus 1 is the most important, and we'll end with this. Number 1, the first step of preparing is repairing. Now, you may not be familiar with the earlier sense of that word repair. We think repair means fix it. You know, I got to repair this device. But there's a very early and elegant way of talking about repairing. It's after a meal, it's time to repair to the living room. All right. It's time to repair to get some coffee. Let's repair to the coffee shop. So repairing is changing your position and your posture so you can see something and continue something that you've already done, but in a whole new space and a whole new sensibility. And I think repairing is so important because how much mystery is there in life? And because we aren't repairing, because we aren't occupying some new space and some new sensibility, that we are totally missing out on so much mystery in life. If life were only about certitude and constancy and consistency and comfort, there would only be mathematics and we'd all be mathematicians. And I'm a terrible mathematician. So I was terrible at math. But so it's not. Life's about mystery, surprise, serendipity, when you least expect it. So God ambushes us. God's a God of adventure. Advent and adventure, the same word. I mean, the Advent, it leads us on the greatest adventures. And adventure means surprise, challenges, ups and downs. Number 2, to be in this state of preparedness, you've got to become a learning organism. Your church has got to become a learning organization. That means, and Marshall McLuhan is the first one to say this, that we've got to go from earning a living to learning a living. It's not so much anymore that you earn a living, but you learn a living, because if you don't learn, you're never going to earn. And that learning component is key. The half-life of a scientific education now is 6 years. In other words, every 6 years, 50% of what you knew, 6 years ago was wrong, will not be wrong. The half-life of an engineering education is 3 years. What's the half-life of a computer education? Okay, 12 months, 18 months. So it's got to be a constant thing. So preparedness has got to be constantly open to unlearning. I know some things that aren't true. I just posted on Twitter today that sometimes I change my post because I'm a whole different person after 4 minutes. I mean, you delete it and start over, because that's how fast change is happening. So you've got to constantly learn. You got to be a learner, and a learner is a state of preparedness. You cannot commit yourself to, the only thing you commit yourself to with that kind of firm finality and firmness is, I know whom I have believed, and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I have committed unto him against that day. Number 3, you spin out scenario contingencies. You don't say, okay, I know what's going to happen, I can predict what's going to happen, I'm going to plan accordingly. The best thing you can do in planning is scenario planning, which is, I'm going to spin out a worst case scenario for the next couple of years, and I'm going to spin out a best case scenario, and then I'm going to spin out a status quo scenario. We're facing an election, 2 days. For some people, it could be the worst case. For some people, it could be the best case. And some people, politics, they're all alike. Nothing's going to change. But the point is, if you're going to plan, you've got to spin out multiple scenarios, because we have no idea what scenario is going to materialize. So we got to think multiplicity, simultaneity, concurrently. I mean, we've got to have multiple possibilities in mind at all time. Number 4, and this is something that's becoming more and more apparent, especially in this COVID crisis, this pandemonium that we're all in, and that is weave your net. Weave the net and make the net work. Cultivate relationships. Create this network, this web of relationships, because that is really the greatest asset you have in your life is right there. It's those relationships. And the more we look at how God made this world, for God exists in relationships, so it ought to be expected that everything that God makes has that relational component to it. And it's true. I mean, they're finding out, that soil microbiology, it's called the Rhizosphere, Rhizosphere. It's the zone of interaction between plants, roots, and microbes in the soil. So the Rhizosphere determines whether you're going to have good produce and good crops or not. So scientists are studying the Rhizosphere, but they're finding that they cannot study just one microbe by itself. It does no good. They got to study microbes in community, because one microbe doesn't function by itself. So we're tend to say, okay, I'm going to study this microbe. I'm going to be a specialist in this microbe. You can't do it. You can't do it. You got to have a multiplicity of microbes that you can work with. Every microbe is embedded in a whole network of relationships. They all interact. They all need each other. They all depend on each other. You take one away and nothing functions normal. And so just as you can't study any bacteria in isolation or even in pairs, there's this magic threshold of 3, by the way. You can do 3 and start to make sense. So it's the same with people. It's the same with us. We all exist in relationship together, and we need to be looked at and thought of together. And this is how we ought to see ourselves, is embedded in this network of relationships. It's only when the relational component is acknowledged that scientists are able to turn willows into aspirin, poppies into morphine, and foxglove into digitalis. And that's the key to each one of us, as God works to bring healing and to bring health to all of us through this web of relationships. Number 5, prophesy your way forward. When you're doing planning, bringing together planning, making your lists, and preparedness, being constantly open for things that come so quick. When you bring those two together, you are in a state of prophesying your way forward. It means you're trusting the Spirit. You're in a posture of trusting the Spirit. And you aren't trying to control it. By the way, the biggest rehab for control addicts is this COVID-19. You think you're in control of your life? You think you're in control of anything? Let's talk about COVID-19. Anybody? So, trust the Spirit. I mean, we got to get rid of this worship at the order of St. Robert's, St. Robert's Rules of Order. We got to start understanding it's all about the rules of the Spirit, the relationships of the Spirit. Move from St. Robert's to Paul, to St. Paul's Rules of the Spirit. And stop thinking that we can Robert's Rules of Order our way, plan our way into the future. I truly believe that we are entering a world where this prophesy way forward, and we're talking about the prophethood of all believers, I believe, just as 500 years ago we had the priesthood of all believers. I believe now we're in a prophethood of all believers, that every one of us is called to do precisely this, to bring together the best of the planning, but not fundamentalist planners. I'm going to stick to the plan, but make your list, but prepare that God can surprise you and ambush you at any moment. Real prophets don't end their sentences with exclamations, but with ellipses. Real prophets never say these three words: will not. Real prophets don't predict. They imagine. They scenario. They read signs. They read spirits. They listen to the vibrations. They discern the signs of the times. And they hear each other. Are you listening? They hear each other. Lightning strikes. Not at random. Lightning strikes at what's most ready to receive the charge. The Spirit strikes upon those most ready and prepared to receive the fire, to host the charge. Are you ready to connect? Are you prepared for the future? You're not going to get there by planning your way forward. And all that I've said needs to be encased in one. Remember I said 5 plus, and this plus. Thy word have I hid in my heart. If every day you are not hiding in your heart the story, if this is not being hidden, if this isn't being hosted, if this isn't being embedded and embodied in your very being, then all these other 5 don't matter at all. Because then you're talking about the possibility of a Frankenstein, not a Lazarus or a Jesus. Thy word have I hid. So that everything that happens in life needs to be passed through this matrix of the story. Everything that happens, you immediately go back to the story. And I just want to end with this incredible. I have a friend, Mary Myers, in Florida, and we were kind of kids together. And she's a PhD in creating all sorts of new strategies for learning. And her mother just died, and when she died, she was going through her papers and found this letter that my mother wrote to her mother. And my mother had just moved with me to Dayton, Ohio. I became president of United Seminary in my early 30s. Mother was not well, and so I moved her in with me, and she spent the last 11 years of her life with me. And I was single at the time. She became kind of the what do I put it, the first lady of the school. But she was very nervous about this, and nervous about leaving her home, leaving all of her friends, and this is my mother reflecting on this move after she moved. There is no question, but God was in this move. He has kept me from looking back. I feel at home, and best of all, I have been so very conscious of His presence. I have many more boxes to open, but I'm not pushing it. It seems "be anxious for nothing" is a message continually from the Lord. But one beautiful message I have from all this. Jesus said, I go to prepare a place for you. This came to me. I don't have to take a box or clothing. He has it all prepared. One day, I will not have to take any luggage with me. This is just a new look at God's love for us. No boxes to load, no luggage to unload. God has it all prepared. Even a move to a new location, she puts through a biblical grid, a biblical matrix. And the story of the scripture becomes part of this story of her life as she makes this transition from Gloversville, New York to Dayton, Ohio. That's the ultimate in preparation. Thy word, are you prepared by the word being hidden in your heart? So that whatever the black swan, whatever the wild card, whatever the game-changing Carrington event may be, you are living out of the Jesus story for that moment. Planners, preparers, prophets. Semiotics is the art of angling, of turning things askew, upside down, inside out, cattywampus, sunny side up, over easy, scrambled, hard-boiled. We hope you enjoyed today's journey, but always remember, it's more important you prepare the preacher than you prepare the sermon.